So this is the workshop for measuring circles, and we're doing objective 2 now, which is actually solving problems associated with circles. Now, everything that you need to solve these problems is in this reference sheet right now. Remember that radius is half the diameter is twice the radius, area is pi r squared, and do remember that because it's r squared, that's the same thing as r times r, and that you should input the radius in there. So if the problem is giving you diameter, be careful and put in the actual diameter divided by 2. Find the radius first and then plug in into the area formula. To find circumference is diameter times pi or 2 times pi times r. Either one of those is fine. Just remember that if you're using the right formula for the right thing. If you have the diameter, use the diameter one. If you have the radius, use the radius one. Technically, you can use the diameter one if you have the radius or vice versa, because if you have the radius, you can just multiply it times 2 and get the diameter, and that's exactly what the other formula is. So really, you only need one, diameter times pi. Just remember to put in the radius times 2 if you're using that formula. Last but not least, if you're giving a problem that has circumference, or it starts from the circumference, and you're trying to figure out what is a diameter, all you have to do is divide the circumference by pi to figure out what the diameter is. And then you can use a diameter to find out other things like the radius and even perhaps the area based on that radius. That is everything you need. 6 formulas. Radius is the diameter divided by 2. Diameter is 2 times radius. Formula for the circle is pi r squared for the area. And for the circumference is diameter times pi. And if you have the circumference and divide by pi, you get diameter. 6 formulas. Plug into them. Solve every problem. As long as you do that carefully, you're going to be fine. So let's do some practice with this constants. Area of the circle with a radius of 20 inches. What will that be? Well, I know the area of the circle is pi r squared, or r times pi. Now, I already have the radius here is 20, so all I have to do is 20 times pi. Now, in the actual test, it may give you the answers, or if they give you multiple choice, in terms of pi. And that's if you just multiply the radius times the radius, you would get 400 pi. If you see pi among the answer choices, that means they do not want you to multiply by pi. But if the pi is missing, you need to actually multiply times pi. So you actually need to do that in the calculator. And I suggest you use the pi button so you get a more accurate answer. Notice that you just do that, 20 times 20 times pi, and you would get that, 1,257 about. By the way, notice the difference if you don't use the pi button, okay? If I'm going to do 20 times 3.14. It's a slightly different answer, right? So instead of having all those extra decimals, it's 1,256, where the 1,257 would technically be more accurate. Now, you're not going to have any problems with that, per se, on the content assessment, because all the answers are far enough from each other that it's not going to be round-off error that's going to cause a problem. So you can pick that closest answer. But if you're not getting exactly the right answer, it's either because you did not use the pi or the problem wanted you to use exactly 3.14. So just read the question carefully. And if it says to use 3.14, use 3.14. But if it doesn't, it's better to use the pi button in the calculator when you're trying to calculate. But do remember that sometimes the answer will be listed in terms of pi, just like this, 400 pi. And if it is, you do not need to multiply times pi in the calculator to get the answer. But this should have been 1,257 about. And I say about because pi is that irrational number that goes forever. Let's try another one. Falcon's Pizza offers 3 slices of pizza. A large pizza has a diameter of 12 inches. What is the area? So here you have to be careful. They're giving you the diameter, but the area has to be in terms of radius. So I have to first find the radius, but that's pretty easy because radius is just diameter divided by 2. So that means the radius would be 6. Now that I know the radius is 6, I do 6 times pi. That's pi r squared. And that gives me 36 pi. And since they wanted the answer in terms of pi, that's it. I don't need to do anything else. If they didn't, I would have to do 36 times pi in the calculator, but they want in terms of pi. They say it here, in terms of pi. So I'm done. All right? Be careful, though. See how they gave you the diameter? And you could have put in 12 in there and gotten 144 pi, and that would have been the wrong answer. All right, so from now on, make sure you pause before I try each problem so that you can practice on your own, okay? All right, number 3. They're giving us the circumference of a crater. That's the distance around the crater as 72 kilometers, and they want the radius. Now, I don't really have a formula for that, but I do have a formula that gives me the diameter based on the circumference. And that's basically if I do circumference divided by pi. So all I have to do is get that 72 and divide it by pi, or 3.14, whatever the problem tells you to use. I like to use the button in the calculator, and I'm going to get my answer. For the diameter, though, remember, this is the diameter, not the radius. Okay, so then if I do that in the calculator, I will get 72 divided by pi, and that gives me the diameter, which is 22.9. But I want the radius. The radius is just half of that. So if I divide it by 2, boom, I got my radius, which is 11.5, about 11.5. Now, 22.9 is the original diameter, but we have to remember that we have to divide it by 2 to get the radius, which equals 11.5 about in this problem. All right. So remember, big hint. If a problem starts by giving you circumference, that's basically the formula that you have to use here. That last formula is the one that solves you the problem. So this is a big hint. So the first big hint that I have you for you to be careful to put the radius in the actual area formula. And the second big hint is that if your problem starts with circumference, they want you to use this last formula to find a diameter and then maybe the radius from there. Okay, what is the circumference of a circle with a radius of 50 feet? All right, we have a formula for that. Circumference of a circle is just diameter times pi, or 2 times pi times the radius, since the diameter is just 2 times the radius. So since I have the radius, I'm going to use that version. So 2 times pi times the radius. Now the radius is 50 feet. So all I have to do is 2 times 50, which is 100 pi. Now that could be what the answer choices give you, if the answer choices are in terms of pi. Or you can go to the calculator and plug that in, and you would get about 314 in this case. All right? Part of my terrible handwriting with the mouse here. One more problem. So we have a cookie cutter that has a radius of 1.5 inches. What is the circumference of the cookie and the area? So we're going to find both. So circumference is just 2 times radius times pi. So that would be 1.5 times 2 times pi for our circumference. It's always good to label so that you don't get mixed up. So that would be the same thing as 3 times pi. Now, since they don't want it in terms of pi, I'm going to actually calculate that. 3 times pi, which is 9.4 about this thing, about 9.4. The area, though, would be radius, which is 1.5, times the radius, because it's radius squared, times the pi. And let's see what we get. 1.5 times 1.5 will be 2.25 pi, and that could be the answer choice if they left it in terms of pi, but they may also want you to multiply times pi, which in this case will give you 7.1 about inches squared, right? All right, number 7, the baseball batter is on deck. He has a circle that has 5 feet on diameter. Remember, diameter is across the whole thing. What is the circumference and what is the area? So circumference is just diameter times pi. So that would just be 5 pi. Or if I actually have to figure that out, if they didn't leave it in terms of pi, it is 15.7. About 15.7 feet, the circumference. For area, I have to be careful because the area formula is in terms of radius. And what they just gave me is 5 diameter. Okay, so I have to use half of that, which is 2.5 times 2.5. That is the worst 2 ever. Times pi. All right. Now, if you put that in the calculator, you get 2.5 times 2.5, and you get 6.25 times pi, all right, which would be 19.6. Hopefully, you've been pausing and trying with me. Actually, it's closer to, 19.6. All right, we have one last one left. A circle has a circumference of 400. Oh, it started by giving you circumference. So I already know which formula I'm going to need. The last one, diameter circumference divided by pi. So they want the radius and the diameter in that case. So let's try to figure that out. So the circumference is 400. And if I divide that by pi, I will get the diameter of this circle. So let's try that. 400 divided by pi gives you 127. So I already have the diameter is about 127, rounded, right? Now the radius would be half of that. So if I divide that by 2, I get 63.7. So the radius would be 63.7, which is basically that number divided by 2. Now, of course, you may notice that 127 divided by 2 is not 63.7, it's 63.5. But in the calculator, I didn't round, right? I just used the entire number and divided by 2, and it gave me a more precise answer. That's it. All the problems are like these, and I hope that you found this helpful. Good luck, and I'll see you for office hours, or send me an email if you're still having problems.